Listen closely, my friends. Retirement is not the end of something. It is the beginning of the most important chapter you have ever had. The chapter where, for the first time in decades, the time is yours. Not your employer's, not your family's urgent demands, not the alarm clock that pulled you out of bed before you were ready, yours. And what you do with that time, how you fill it, what you choose to pursue, will determine something far more important than how you spend your days. It will determine who you become in this chapter, and how long and how well that chapter lasts, because here is what the research consistently shows, and what the Stoics understood long before the research existed. The person who retires into activity, into purpose, into the daily pursuit of something that challenges and engages and connects, ages differently, not just feels different, ages differently. The mind stays sharper, the body stays stronger, the spirit stays present. And the person who retires into passive waiting, into the television and the couch, and the comfortable disappearing, ages faster. Not because rest is wrong, but because the human being at any age was designed for engagement, for challenge, for the specific aliveness that comes from doing something that stretches you slightly, beyond where you already are, today. 7 hobbies that do exactly that, not just to fill the time. To fill the chapter with the specific quality that the Stoics called the examined life, the life that is genuinely lived. Before we begin, I want to share something from Marcus Aurelius. He wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." That instruction, written 2,000 years ago, is the perfect description of what retirement can be, if you let it, not a winding down, a waking up, to the things that were always there, waiting for the time that finally arrived. These 7 hobbies are gateways to that waking up. Hobby 1, gardening, the practice of patience and growth. There is something about putting your hands in the soil that connects you to something older and deeper than almost any other activity available. Gardening is not just a hobby, it is a practice, a daily returning to something alive that requires your attention, your consistency, your willingness to show up, even on the days when nothing seems to be growing. And then, slowly, in the way that the best things always happen, something emerges, green, real, alive because of what you gave it. The Stoics believed deeply in the connection between tending something and building character. Seneca wrote, "Retire into yourself as much as you can, but also associate with those who will make you better." Your garden is both of those things simultaneously. It is the quiet retreat into yourself and the daily engagement with something that genuinely needs you. The physical benefits alone are remarkable. Regular gardening reduces stress, improves strength and flexibility, keeps the joints moving, provides the specific satisfaction of seeing the direct result of your effort. But beyond the physical, gardening teaches something the Stoics prized above almost everything. Patience, the understanding that some things cannot be rushed, that growth has its own timeline, that your job is not to force the result, but to create the conditions, and then trust the process. That lesson, learned in the garden, is one of the most valuable things you can bring to the rest of your life. Hobby 2, writing. The Art of Knowing What You Think by Marcus Aurelius kept a journal, not for history, not for publication, for himself, because he understood something that most people never discover. You do not know what you think until you write it down. The act of writing, of taking the swirling thoughts and memories and opinions and experiences that exist in a kind of fog inside the mind, and translating them into words on a page, does something remarkable. It clarifies, it organizes, it reveals. And at the stage of life you are in now, the stage where decades of experience have accumulated, where you have lived through more than most people you know, where the stories and the lessons and the wisdom are simply there, waiting, Writing is one of the most powerful things available. Not because you need to publish, not because anyone needs to read it, but because the act of writing, the daily returning to the page, keeps the mind sharp in ways that passive consumption never can. It builds vocabulary, it maintains cognitive function, it processes the experiences of a life in a way that simply remembering them does not. And the journal you build, the memoir you start, the letters to grandchildren you write, will be among the most valuable things you ever create. Not because of their literary quality, because they are you, genuinely, in your own words, and that is irreplaceable. Hobby 3, learning a new language, the ultimate brain challenge. There is something that happens in the brain when you learn a new language after 60, that scientists describe as one of the most powerful cognitive workouts available. New neural pathways, new connections, new ways of thinking that the brain has to build from scratch, which means growth, real measurable brain growth at an age when most people have been told the brain is declining. But here is what the Stoics would add to the science. Learning a language is not just a mental exercise, it is an act of genuine humility. Because when you begin a new language, you are a beginner, genuinely. Without the expertise you have built over decades, without the competence that experience normally provides, you are starting in the most basic and vulnerable way. And the Stoics believed there was something profoundly valuable in that position. Epictetus said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." The language learner has no illusion of already knowing. They are in the most honest learning position possible, which makes them, regardless of age, capable of genuine growth. Choose a language connected to something you love, the country you always wanted to visit, the heritage you want to reconnect with, the grandchild whose other language you want to speak. The reason makes the learning possible, and the learning makes the brain new again. Hobby 4, walking. The thinking person's exercise. The ancient philosophers did not sit in chairs to think, they walked. Aristotle's school was called the peripatetic school, from the Greek word for walking around, because the ancient thinkers understood what modern neuroscience has confirmed. Walking and thinking are not separate activities, they are the same activity. Movement activates the mind. The rhythm of walking, the specific pace that is neither too fast nor too slow, creates the perfect conditions for the kind of thinking that sitting rarely produces, the insight that arrives on the walk, the problem that resolves itself mid-stride, the memory that surfaces, the creative connection between two things that were not connected before the walk began. Marcus Aurelius walked. Seneca walked. Epictetus walked, not because they had to, because they understood that the moving body houses a more active mind. And for the person after 60, walking is perhaps the single most complete hobby available. It is exercise without the gym. It is nature without the equipment. It is meditation without the cushion. It is thinking without the desk. And done daily, even for 30 minutes. It produces measurable improvements in cardiovascular health, joint flexibility, mental clarity, emotional regulation, and the specific quality of life that most people are looking for, and most people walk right past without realizing it was available. Every single day, at absolutely no cost. Walk every day, not for exercise alone, for your mind, for your spirit, for the specific thinking that only happens when you are moving. Hobby 5. Music, playing or listening, the language the brain never forgets. Music does something to the brain that scientists are still working to fully understand. It activates more regions simultaneously than almost any other activity: mirror, emotion, motor function, language, mathematical processing, all at once, all engaged, all being maintained and exercised in the specific way that keeps them working. For the person who already plays an instrument, retirement is the time to return to it fully. Without the interruptions that work and family always provided, the hour of practice that was never available before is available now. And for the person who always wanted to play, now is not too late. The research on learning music after 60 is remarkably positive. The brain adapts, new pathways form. The challenge of learning to read music, or to coordinate the hands, or to find the melody, is exactly the kind of challenge that keeps the mind young. But even if playing is not your path, listening deeply, really listening, with attention and presence, to music that moves you, is one of the most restorative activities available. Seneca wrote, "Music is a pleasure that has nothing wrong with it." He was right, in ways that science now confirms. Put music in your retirement every day, whether playing or listening. Let the one language the brain never forgets. Keep speaking to it. Hobby 6, teaching or mentoring. Giving what you know. Here is something the Stoics understood deeply. The life that is most worth living is not the one that accumulates the most. It is the one that gives the most. And after 60 years of living, of working, of learning, of failing and recovering, of building the specific wisdom that only comes from experience, you have something that cannot be replicated, cannot be Googled, cannot be learned from a course or a book or a video, the specific distilled understanding of how things actually work, that can only be earned through decades of living them. And that understanding, shared with someone younger, someone at the beginning of a path you have already walked, is one of the most valuable things on earth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What injures the hive injures the bee." He understood that individual flourishing and collective flourishing were not separate things, they were the same thing. When you share what you know, you flourish, the person receiving flourishes, and the relationship that forms between the experienced and the beginning is one of the most nourishing available. Find someone to teach. A grandchild, a young professional in your field, a community group that needs what you know, a charity that benefits from your expertise. Give what you have spent a lifetime building, and discover what the Stoics always knew: the giving is the receiving. Hobby 7, meditation and stillness. The practice the Stoics lived. After everything, after the gardening and the walking and the music and the learning, the most important hobby of all, the one that makes all the others better, the one that the Stoics would recognize immediately as the foundation of the examined life: stillness, daily, deliberate, unhurried stillness, not necessarily formal meditation, not the app or the cushion or the specific technique. Unless those things work for you, the essential thing, the practice of sitting quietly, with yourself, without distraction, without agenda, and listening. To the breath, to the thoughts that surface, to the body that is always communicating. If only the noise would stop long enough for you to hear it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. That retreat, that quiet interior space, is what daily stillness builds access to. And the person who has access to it, who can go there, even for 10 minutes, every morning before the day begins, is the person who meets everything else: the gardening, the walking, the learning, the teaching, from a place of genuine presence. Not going through the motions, actually there, in the life, in the chapter, in the moment fully. Which is the only way any of it counts. Listen closely, my friends. One final time. The Stoics had a phrase for the life well lived. They called it eudaimonia, often translated as happiness, but the better translation is flourishing, the life that is actively flourishing, not comfortable, not passive, not waiting for the next thing, actively engaged with the specific gifts that each day contains. And the 7 hobbies in this video are not just activities. They are pathways to flourishing, to the specific aliveness that the examined life produces. At any age, but perhaps most powerfully, in the chapter where you finally have the time. Marcus Aurelius wrote, When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive. Every morning of your retirement is that privilege. Use it. Not just to rest, to live, to grow, to give, to learn, to become, even now, even at this stage, even in this chapter, something more than you were yesterday. That is not retirement, that is the beginning. If this gave you something real today, share it with someone you love who is in or approaching retirement and needs to hear that the best is not behind them, skewed for new wisdom every single week.